We're talking about 3 bad free agent signings, and then you get to watch me over average 2K gameplay. So, the first one is Rajon Rondo. Now, the Pelicans signed Rondo to a pretty cheap contract. I believe it's like $3 million for one season, which isn't a bad thing in a vacuum. But the reason why I'm going to have this up here is because everything surrounding this signing, specifically what the Pelicans' plans are with Rajon Rondo, which is that they want to start him next to Drew Holiday. I think this is a pretty bad idea because, first and foremost, if Drew Holiday ever has the ball in his hands, the defense isn't going to give a crap about Rondo, and they're just going to provide extra help whenever Drew Holiday wants to do anything in a screen with Anthony Davis or DeMarcus Cousins, which would then mitigate some of what Holiday can provide for them as a creator, which they desperately need because besides DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis, the perimeter talent on this team is kind of lacking. Now, if you have Rondo with the ball in his hands, I could see the avenue for that type of thing working out because Drew Holiday is a good shooter, but Rondo doesn't attack the defense anymore. The guy shoots like less than 1 free throw a game, so the defense doesn't have to give a crap about him actually getting inside the three-point line and making things happen. So as a result, Drew Holiday's shooting that could be a thing off of Rondo isn't really going to be a thing at all. And we're not even talking about the defensive side of the floor where Rondo's just flat out not that good anymore. I would kind of guess that Holiday would be playing the shooting guard position because he's taller than Rondo and he's a better shooter and he's a better defensive player. I mean, maybe Drew can handle that, but even then, I feel like Drew defending point guards is a luxury. Him defending shooting guards hurts him a little bit more, and I don't trust Rondo to defend pretty much anyone. So, I just don't really see how Rondo would help out the Pelicans at all. I think Rajon can still be okay as a backup point guard with some shooting around him, but that's not what he's going to be here. And the other odd thing was how the Pelicans traded Tim Frazier for a second-round pick from the Wizards, which is going to be like the 50th pick in the draft, which typically means you wouldn't get much of anything. I mean, Tim Frazier, sure, he wasn't that great this previous year, but I don't think he was awful either. I mean, the guy still put up 5 assists a game with only 1.6 turnovers. Like, that's a pretty legit passer who could be coming off the bench for you. And, I mean, yeah, he didn't shoot well from the field, but I'm like, if it's between him or Rajon Rondo, I'd just go with Tim Frazier at that point, you know? Just seemed like an unnecessary move given who they eventually got. I mean, I think they would benefit much more from having E'Twaun Moore start, because at least the dude can shoot from outside. But the Pelicans wanted to go with Rondo, and the Pels, the problems that they had to address this offseason was lack of shooting and getting an actual small forward on the roster. They did not acquire the small forward they need, and Rondo doesn't help them with their shooting. And I also think he hurts Drew Holiday, so not really on board with this one. The next one concerns the Detroit Pistons, a team who didn't already have that much luxury when it came to their salary, as they're now over the salary cap and they were pushing up against it before. They went with a point guard as their one signing. They signed Langston Galloway, $6.5 million this season, and the contract actually goes up, and by the end of the contract, all the way in 2020, it's at $7.3 million. Here's the thing. Number one, Langston Galloway isn't that good. So committing this much money to a guy like this just is not very smart in a nutshell. I mean, not once has the guy actually shot above 40% from the field in his career. He's been an okay enough three-point shooter, I guess. He shot 39% this previous season. I think if that's the one thing you can do well, why are you getting $7 million a season? I mean, he also isn't pretty much anything of a playmaker. The most amount of assists he ever averaged was 3.3 a game, while also playing 32 minutes a night for the New York Knicks. So Galloway just by himself isn't that good of a signing for this much money. But then, when you look at who the other point guards are on this Pistons team, that's when this gets really puzzling. They already have Ish Smith, who You could make the argument should be their starting point guard. He might not be as talented as Reggie Jackson, but they seem to play better with Ish as opposed to Reggie. But still, Ish is definitely going to be their backup point. He's a dude who can actually make some plays. And then there's Reggie Jackson, who's probably going to start for them, and who knows if he's actually going to be on the team for too much longer, given that his shoot-first mentality on top of not really being that great, it has not helped out the Pistons too much. But still, you have these two guys ahead of Langston Galloway, so you paid $7 million a season, well, a contract that will eventually be $7 million a season, for a guy who already plays the position of two other dudes on your team, and those two dudes are better than him. So you essentially just wasted about $6 to $7 million for the next 3 seasons? That's a pretty bad move, Detroit. And they got him for the mid-level. I mean, if you look at some of the dudes who went for the mid-level this previous season, they could have got an actual player with that money. But who knows? And then finally, we're going to go to the New York Knicks. It's the Tim Hardaway Jr. contract. There's a few reasons why this one's pretty puzzling. So the contract is $70 million for 4 years. Well, almost $71 million, really. He's going to make $16.5 million this season, and that is actually going to go up all the way to 2020. And in 2021, he has a player option. Now, I can understand being intrigued by Tim Hardaway Jr. because of this season he had for Atlanta. He showed himself to be an actual offensive player at times, playing off-ball pretty well, but also creating some of his own offense himself. So I can see why you might want to throw a contract at the guy. $70 million for 4 years, though? Like, you could have got him for like $10 million a season, or maybe even $9 million. Like, what was the market for this guy? Like, did anybody else hear any sort of rumors about someone throwing this much money at Tim Hardaway freaking Jr.? A guy who is still not good defensively, and he finally showed some offensive prowess. I mean, there's a decent chance that he could just drop off, and that last season was just one of those things that just happens for guys, and then their real self just kind of comes back because, I mean, it's tough to maintain outplaying yourself unless you get legitimately better, and I think, given the small sample size, it's warranted to fear that Hardaway really is not as good as he showed last season for Atlanta. Now, even if he is that good and he's going to be a solid 16, 17-point scorer for you, I still think it's an overpay, especially when you're looking at the other contracts on this team. You got Joakim Noah, who's going to make $17 million this season. You got Courtney Lee, who's going to make $11 million. I like Courtney Lee, but I mean, come on. Lance Thomas is making $6.5 million this season. The money's adding up, man. I mean, the Knicks are right at the salary cap this year, and then they're going to be just under the salary cap next season as well. So they're pretty hindered for the next 2 years to make actual moves for a guy in Tim Hardaway Jr. who might not be worth it at all. Also, when you look at the point guard of the future for these guys in Ntilikina, he's meant to be a guy who isn't going to be an amazing creator. At least that's what everybody says about him. They compare him to like George Hill. So as a result of that, your 2 guard would have to be someone who's a bit more of a ball handler and can play make for other guys. Tim Hardaway Jr. is not that whatsoever. He averages 2.3 assists per game, and he still gets over 1 turnover a game. So I just don't really see what he does for you. Like, he can score the ball, sure. I mean, the Knicks need defenders. They need a guy who can create for others. Tim Hardaway Jr. is not doing that. So, just a puzzling move for New York. And a puzzling 3 moves, really.